Despite being released 3 years after its predecessor, Disciples 2 Dark Prophecy changes the formula very little, at least from a mechanics perspective. What it does bring to the table is an enhanced story scope, upgraded graphics, and a strong focus on its dark fantasy atmosphere. Judging by the game's reputation at the time, as well as some of the comments I got on the Sacred Lands video, it seems that Disciples 2 should have been the title I initially discussed in this series. But I wanted to play the first title so that I would have a frame of reference for the second. So now that being said, is it a classic? Truth be told, at first glance it might not even seem that much more different than Sacred Lands, but the differences are larger than they were between, say, Heroes 1 and 2. The overall maps look similar, but the visuals have clearly gone through an upgrade over the intervening years. This is most noticeable when it comes to the city screens and troops, where we're greeted now by considerably better looking 3D models. But it should also be noted that the portraits for the various heroes and units are still in that hand-drawn, manga-esque sort of style from the first one. Otherwise, nothing really changed. You can still only build one thing per turn, and you need to decide the development direction of your troops through your building choices. The base game comes with the 4 factions from the first one: humans, dwarves, undead and demons. However, you can also play as the elves with the Rise of the Elves expansion. Yeah, about the expansion, some weird shenanigans happened with those, because the first 2, Guardians of Light and Servants of Darkness, were standalone releases that featured extra missions for only 2 factions each. However, nowadays you don't have to worry about that, because the version that is available on the most popular digital platforms is called Galleon's Return, which packs in both expansions alongside the base game. The Rise of the Elves expansion is the only one that actually adds a whole new faction to the game, and they come with their own type of mana and spells as you'd expect. You get the Rise of the Elves bundled with the gold version of the game, by the way. Gameplay experience wise, things are very much like in the first. You build up your capital, explore the map with your heroes, and do your best to keep them and their troops alive in order to gather experience and upgrade them. The buildings you can construct are divided into their own categories, and some of them offer you various useful features, such as the ability to research spells or that of reviving and healing your heroes and troops, while others allow for the recruitment and upgrading of said troops. Whenever it comes to the troop building, you have a choice between 2 options when it comes to their upgraded form. This adds some flexibility to your troop loadout so as to fit better with either your playstyle or with the type of hero. I feel I did not spend enough time describing how the hero and combat system worked in Sacred Lands. And I also think this is the most important aspect of the game that sets it apart, especially from its more well-known and popular competitor, the Hero series. So, starting with the type of Lord class you choose as a player, you start to define your playstyle. There are 3 classes to choose from at the beginning of each game: Warrior Lord, Mage Lord and Guild Master. Each of these comes with their own characteristics. The Warrior Lord's units heal for 15% of their damage every day, but will be limited to level 4 spells. The Mage Lord can research spells at half the cost and also cast spells twice per day, while the Guild Master allows your Thief hero to do more actions and decreases the cost of city upgrades by 50%. However, the Guild Master is also limited to level 4 spells. Regardless of which type of Lord you choose, you will only have access to 5 types of heroes: Warrior, Mage, Ranger, Rod-Bearer and Thief. Now, the Warrior, Mage and Ranger classes are your fighting heroes, and depending on the type of Lord you choose, some of them will do better than others for obvious reasons. The remaining 2 hero types are totally unique to the Disciple series. The Rod-Bearer being the hero tasked with expanding your faction's physical influence via rods, which you ideally plant near resource generating areas so as to gain their production once they are under your control. The Thief heroes have access to specific actions when it comes to enemy armies and cities. When it comes to combat, Disciples also differentiates itself from the Hero series by only allowing you to have a very limited number of troops in your hero squad. Not only that, but the heroes are a part of the fight. They're a major part of the fight, seeing as how they usually have way more HP than their troops and tend to be the main target of the enemies. Disciples combat focuses on small squads made up of the hero and up to 5 units, all of them getting experience from a successful encounter. and the XP is crucial to your long-term survival, seeing as how the troops in Disciples aren't as expendable as they would be in other games, as evidenced by the existence of resurrection potions and the possibility of resurrecting both the hero and troops in cities. Even if you lose a hero, as long as one of your troops survives, you can go back to a city and resurrect everyone. Obviously, if a unit is dead, they will not get any XP from the one battle, but that doesn't really matter that much when balanced with the ability to resurrect them to begin with. Once a unit reaches its next level, their form will change depending on your building choices, and their stats and abilities will improve as well. The hero, on the other hand, when they level up, you get the option of endowing them with a variety of new abilities. Things like adding another grid slot, wearing travel items, artifacts, banners, using spell scrolls and the like. The unit and hero models have seen the most attention paid to them when compared to Sacred Lands. They look considerably better and more evocative, their various ability and spell animations being a clear upgrade as well from Sacred Lands. Interesting note about spells. Your hero can only cast spells and use potions outside of combat. So if you want to buff your troops with a spell or potion or debuff the enemy, you need to do it before you engage in combat with them. And this is something you need to get used to doing quite often in order to soften up your enemies and improve your chances. But sometimes this might be a bit difficult, because while the maps look cool due to the dark fantasy atmosphere, it can sometimes be difficult to tell where the enemies are. The workaround I found for this is to just pay attention to the color of the flags that mark your proposed pathway. If they turn red at a certain point, that's an enemy. The actual fights are extremely quick by turn-based tactical game standards, and this is in pretty stark contrast to the hero series, where full army fights can take a fair bit of time. Your units are locked in their spots on what basically is a 3x4 grid. You get 3x2 and the enemy gets 3x2. Each unit, depending on its characteristics, will be able to attack adjacent enemies, namely those who are directly in front of them and the next adjacent square or squares. Ranged units can attack whichever enemy they want, and most spellcasting units will affect all enemies, exceptions being units that heal. This makes your troop arrangement incredibly important, because your first line will generally take the most damage. As such, it's not the best idea to populate it with squishy spellcasters. Likewise, each faction has at least one unit that occupies 2 squares. A much stronger unit, but it also costs your hero 2 slots. It doesn't count as one unit, because each hero has a limit to the number of slots they can control, although you can increase the number with a level up ability. Where Disciple 2's combat differs mechanically from the first title is your troops now have wait and defend options. The wait will move their sequence within the turn at hand, while defend will decrease the amount of damage they take if attacked. Both of those being good additions. So the combat is quick, and honestly, if you don't pay attention and use your few attacks optimally, you might discover you're losing more troops than you initially thought, or lose the encounter outright. Because, and this is an important thing to mention, your troops have a hit percentage, and even though that hit percentage is high, generally around 80%, that does mean that they will miss from time to time. That being said, the games themselves take considerably longer than you'd think when relating them to the combat, because there is a constant back and forth between yourself and the enemy AI, and also, in this game, you cannot conquer the enemy citadel. I mean, you can try to do it. I'm pretty sure some people have tried and maybe succeeded, but the Guardian is so powerful so as to dissuade any such attempt. So that means you will always have a source of enemies to contend with. Now I need to get into a bit of the technical aspect and mention that even though I ran the GOG version, I did have to use Varok's GL wrapper to get the game to work properly on my system. Now, it may be because I have Windows 10 and a 2-monitor setup, I can't be sure. However, if you're planning on playing it anytime soon and have trouble getting it to render properly, I'll put the link to the wrapper in the description. So now comes up the question, what maketh a video game a classic? Some would say it's objective, some would say it depends, and there's definitely something to be said about subjective classics, which is something I'll talk about in this series as well. But in order for a game to be an objective classic, it has to be considered to be good over a period of time, has to be remembered as such, and also it has to stand up to current day scrutiny. And I also consider that 10 years is the minimum period required for such a hindsight-based judgment to take place. In this case, it's been 20, so we're cool. Both the base game, Dark Prophecy, and its major expansion, Rise of the Elves, got solid reviews at release, and as I mentioned at the beginning, Disciples 2 seems to be the title that hit its sweet spot in terms of popularity at time of release. And I can see why. The 3D models and animation were a clear upgrade over the first title, coupled with the very particular combat system and the heavy focus on story and atmosphere really set Disciples 2 apart from Heroes of Might and Magic. And let's keep in mind that 2002 was the release year of Heroes 4, and I think the disappointment with that title that many Heroes players felt back then. And yes, I know some of you are Heroes 4 stans because it was either the first one you played or the only one you played. I get it, I'm not referring to you. That disappointment might have made them look towards Disciples 2 for something similar, only for them to discover that it is not simply a clone of Heroes, but a very particular experience that should be considered as such on its own terms, not in the dichotomy of better or worse than Heroes. The game definitely is still very much playable by today's standards, and it spawned yet another sequel, Disciples 3, which is not as well regarded as this one from what I've seen. And recently, a different Disciples title game was released, Disciples Legacy, which takes place in the same realm, but I don't think it has anything to do with the stories from the first three. It also changes a lot of things around in terms of combat and such. I played the demo and thought it was pretty promising. So anyway, Disciples 2 is definitely an objective classic. But what do you think about that and the Disciples series in general? Let me know in the comments. Hey there watcher who's still watching, thank you for sticking around. If you enjoyed the video, then please do me a gigantic favor, feed the algorithm and like and comment on it. My entire playlist of Visit the Classic videos will be showing up on screen right about now maybe, so that you can check out some of the other titles I covered here. I also have a Patreon page and it would be deeply appreciated if you check it out as long as you have some coin to spend. I've been StefaNonsense, thank you very much for watching, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you relatively soon.